All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to our October YouTube Live session. And this is your first time joining, welcome. We do these YouTube Lives every single month. Let me know if the audio is coming in clear and loud. And if you guys are joining us live on YouTube right now, you can actually leave a comment in the chat window. If you're on your phone, it should be down below. And if you're on desktop, it should be there on the side. Feel free to introduce yourself. We've got Christian in the comments. I'll be seeing everything that comes in there, and let us know where you're from, where you're coming from today. And sounds like everything is working well. Christian says audio is superb. Gerald says sounds great. So welcome everyone to our monthly YouTube Live session. If you guys are watching this after the fact and not live, you won't be able to leave a comment live, but you can definitely leave a comment and we'll respond to that later. So on today's session, we're going to go through our normal kind of protocol. We're going to cover a few of the top news stories that we've seen with Uber and Lyft, spend a few minutes on that. A couple of the latest app updates that we've seen on Uber and Lyft, and there are a couple that just got announced today, one on Lyft. And then we'll spend a majority of the time on question and answer. So I'm here to answer all of your questions. So feel free to bring it. And I'm definitely going to try and get to as many questions as possible. If for some reason I don't get to your question, you can always email me directly, harry@therideshareguy.com, and I guarantee you will get a response at some point, hopefully at least within a day or two. So looks like we've got a bunch of people joining right now. We're already up to about 30 or 40 people watching live. So thank you very much for joining. Music City Drivers from Nashville, Gustavo, welcome from San Diego. I was just there last week. Monica, good to see you again. I always appreciate you joining. Seems like we've got a lot of familiar names. Your driver, Mike, he's always on here, so thank you for joining, Mike. Big ups. Duncan from Austin. So it looks like we've got some new faces, some new names too, which is always good. And we're going to go ahead and get started now that I've given a few minutes for this to populate. Looks like everything is working well. No technical glitches or anything like that. So welcome to the October YouTube Live session. Make sure you guys, we're going to go for about an hour right now. I started a couple minutes late today, so I'll definitely make that up at the end. Make sure you guys stay tuned to the end because we're actually going to be doing a pretty cool giveaway. One of our sponsors on the blog and on the YouTube channel is QuickBooks Self-Employed, and they've been a big partner for us and a really important partner for us because it really just allows us to provide all of this content, do these live sessions. I have Christian in the comments responding to everything that I don't get to, answering all your emails. It really helps us provide all of that. And we're going to be doing a giveaway of 2 subscriptions to QuickBooks Self-Employed, and that's going to be 12 months subscription. So basically, we're going to give 2 people a full year subscription, which is $120 value to QuickBooks Self-Employed at the end of the show. Christian will leave a link. It's going to be therideshareguy.com/YTQBSE. If you guys are interested in looking at the product, checking it out, they also offer a free trial. So you're going to get 30 days free of QuickBooks Self-Employed. As that free trial, and at the end we're going to do that giveaway because obviously, as you guys know, taxes are super important. We always get a ton of tax questions on these YouTube lives, and things like mileage tracking and expenses. So one of the best reasons to download that QuickBooks Self-Employed is for the mileage tracking, and you can also just get a really good holistic view of your expenses. So definitely make sure you stay tuned in the end to that. We always try to do a pretty cool giveaway. Since QuickBooks Self-Employed has been sponsoring the YouTube Lives, we've had some good giveaways. And then I think last time we actually even gave out some swag. So hopefully if anyone has ever won swag from us or won the QuickBooks Live Self-Employed, I think Christian is going to let me know here who won from last month. So you guys know that we're not just keeping these things for ourselves. And yeah, because we're giving those away. I think last time we did give out some swag. So if you guys are having any trouble seeing or hearing me, just go ahead and refresh the feed. It looks like it should be coming in pretty smooth right now. And with that being said, we'll definitely get started. Looks like we've got some people chiming in from Santa Clarita, California. Jose says it's his first time tuning in. So thank you very much, Jose. Now that we've got all the formalities out of the way, Eric says, let me win next. But yeah, definitely, good chances to win. So make sure you stay tuned to the end. You'd be surprised that, not a lot of people actually enter these contests, but I'll tell you how to enter that contest at the end and how you can win that free year of QuickBooks Self-Employed. So, before we get into the full Q&A, I want to talk about a couple of the things we've seen in the news. One interesting story that I didn't see get a lot of publicity, but I think drivers might be super interested in, is this story that came out of, it was actually a study done by UC Davis. And basically what they said is they found that rideshare services like Uber and Lyft actually increase the number of miles, the number of trips people are taking, since a lot of customers, a lot of passengers are actually opting for rideshare over other modes of transportation. So instead of walking, instead of biking, they're actually just taking Uber and Lyft. And there's all these innovations that Uber and Lyft are touting, like UberPOOL and Lyft line, to reduce congestion, reduce traffic. But sort of what this study found is that it's actually doing the opposite, right? People are now going out and really just taking these services more, taking Uber and Lyft more. And I think a lot of that, why drivers care, is because some of these fares are getting so cheap. So, that's definitely a downside, right? I mean, I think that there's more and more customers, there are more and more rides happening, but since they're at such lower prices, more and more people are taking it. I kind of shared this story once where I had a passenger come and she requested a ride, and literally she went down the block, and I asked her why I was like, I had to ask, right? I asked her why she requested a ride, and she said because it was so cheap. So that's definitely something interesting to keep an eye on. And then I also saw a couple app updates that obviously we know Uber dropped down from 6, they were giving drivers 6 destination filters, and they dropped that down to 2, unfortunately. So if you guys have noticed that, I'd be curious to hear your feedback on that. Obviously, a lot of drivers were pretty pissed because, that driver destination, that was probably my favorite feature of 2016. And then, of course, when they upped it to 6, that was super nice, taking advantage of it a lot to reposition, to do airport rides, to try and get surge. So I'd be curious, obviously, to hear your feedback on that if you guys have any thoughts. I think Uber has done a lot in their 180 days of change program. They've sort of shown a lot of goodwill, right? They're clearly adding all these features, making these changes to improve the driver experience. But at the end of the day, those things that matter most to me and that matter most to you as a driver are probably the things that are going to affect your bottom line, right? Increasing rates, getting rid of minimum fares, UberPOOL, they did make a change to UberPOOL where they're now paying you anywhere around $1 basically for that additional pickup. I'm not convinced that basically that's enough to get drivers to go out and do those rides, but it is what it is. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. Uber, I think their Chapter 5 is going to be dropping pretty soon. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And we'll release probably a blog post or a YouTube video when that happens. So if you guys do have any questions, feel free. We're going to start getting into that right now. One other let's say, Mr. Watson, that's a good point. He just mentioned that if you're not aware, Uber Xchange leasing and their enterprise rental program, basically, these are new programs to get new drivers or even existing drivers into leased rideshare leases or rideshare rentals. Uber's actually winding down their Xchange leasing program. So if you have an existing Xchange lease, you probably got an email or a notification from Uber saying that you can keep your lease, but they're not accepting new applications to Uber Xchange. And enterprise is actually closing down completely. So we have an article on the blog that sort of goes into the details around that and kind of what you can do if you're in that situation. So let's see. So thank you, Mr. Watson, for sharing that. We can share a link to that post on the blog. And X Nilo says, Uber doesn't care, man. They care about their bottom line, not yours. See how quickly they axe the number of destination filters. And you're right. Honestly, I think that getting, they increased to 6. Drivers loved it. Drivers were using it everywhere. And then, what Uber said with why they reduced it, and I'll let you guys sort of be the judge of their reasoning, but they said that it was causing basically increased wait times for riders. And if you think about what it does, right? When you set a destination filter, you're only now available for rides in a certain direction. So that's effectively lowering the supply of drivers. So I think Uber's reasoning makes sense that it was probably increasing wait times for riders, but it's sort of tough, right? When they give you something and then they take it away. I guess right off the bat, when I saw that they were going back to 2, I was thinking to myself, why not 3? Why not 4? If 2 worked, but 6 didn't, why not meet in the middle, or why not meet halfway? And I never really saw a reasoning or explanation from Uber as far as why that might make sense. So definitely something to keep in mind there. And let's see, what other questions do we have coming in? Gerald says, why can't the rider enter their apartment number when requesting a ride? Very frustrating trying to find passengers in an apartment complex. And that's a very astute point, Gerald. You know, I have a video actually, because, you know, when I lived in Orange County, there are all these mega apartment buildings and complexes and condos. And whenever you would get a request, I would run into that very problem, right? There might be 12 individual buildings with 100 apartments each in each one. And what I started doing is really, you know, what I think is important is to start looking at these situations proactively, right? When you get a request, a lot of people just immediately accept it. And of course, if you're driving or if you're in a place that, you know, you can't really look at the screen, obviously you want to be safe. But if you're sitting there parked and a request comes in, you have about 7 to 10 seconds, right? As that thing goes beep, 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 beep. I don't know. Actually, that's not really the noise it makes, but you guys know the noise it makes, right? When the request comes in, it's like ping. And you actually have a lot more time than you think, right? If you're not using an app like Maestro that auto accepts. But for those of you that do look at the request, you can actually get a lot of information there. And what I'll do is I'll take a few seconds just to study the screen. After I accept it, I want to see where I'm going before I click navigate and start going, because now if I'm in that situation where, let's say I'm picking up at a bar, let's say I'm picking up at a mall or an apartment building with a bunch of buildings and complexes, right? I know that, hey, I can call this rider maybe a couple minutes out and get directions, or I can send a quick text message to say, hey, I'm going to be on the corner of X and Z, X and Y, you know, make sure that, or, you know, please be out there waiting for me. You can kind of proactively handle that situation as opposed to rolling up and then calling the passenger and then seeing that, oh, it's this huge apartment building, and then seeing that, you know, the passenger is going to have to take some time to come down. You're not going to be able to find them, right? Because all that waiting time really costs you money, right? I guess with Uber, they start the waiting time after 2 minutes, but you may piss off your passenger that way. And, you know, frankly, you just make so much more when your wheels are moving than when you're waiting. You know, honestly, the waiting time, the pay is not even really that big of a deal. So that's sort of how I handle those situations, really thinking about it proactively, right? You never want to arrive somewhere and be like, oh shit, I forgot to do this, right? Didn't think about that, right? Because you can start to know your city and understand where these complexes are, where these buildings are, and stuff like that. And really, I think, do yourself a lot of favors there. So definitely, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you guys can understand that. And feel free to keep the questions coming in. Looks like we got a lot of good questions. And like I said, we'll go for another 45 minutes or so answering as many questions as possible. Take a quick break. All right, so David Aldrich says, can you say no to a rider after you drop them off if they ask you to bring them back where they started because you're not getting paid to go back? So I should probably do a video about this because this is actually a big misconception that I see from a lot of drivers, is that as long as your wheels are moving, right? As long as you haven't ended the ride, you're going to get paid for mileage and you're going to get paid for time. Okay, it doesn't matter what is happening with the passenger, and that's actually one of the nice things, you know, since, you know, Uber, you switched to upfront pricing. There are a bunch of problems with that we could get into on the driver's side. But one of the nice things for drivers, and really how it's always been, is that you always get paid for mileage and time. So let's say you drop off, or let's say you take a passenger to their destination, you don't end the trip, and they say, oh crap, I forgot something at my house. I want to go back to my house and then bring me back here. You can do that trip just without having to change the destination, without doing anything. The app knows and it will track and pay you accordingly. Now, you might run into some problems if you're getting next trip requests. You may want to go offline for those, and, you know, you can do that in the menu, and that's sort of how I would avoid that. But that's definitely one thing. You know, I don't have a problem with those rides. I have a problem more when people want you to wait for like 5 or 10 minutes, and that's a little bit of a different question, but hopefully that makes sense. And let's see, Neil says they can readjust their destination. Exactly, they can readjust their destination, but to be honest, they don't even have to if you don't want to, because sometimes it's a hassle. You know, every situation's a little bit different. So definitely keep that in mind. Bob says, what's your take on the new feature of adding a destination? I think that a rider can do up to 2 or 3 additional stops. So Lyft has had this for a while now, where riders could add an additional stop, and I never got one, or I never actually tested this as a rider. And then, you know, I recently saw that Uber actually added this functionality on the passenger side. I think it was just this week that now passengers can add multiple destinations to really address the situation I just described. And I think it's a good thing, because there are a lot of times where, you know, I've been using it as a passenger or been driving moving as a driver and this situation has arisen. And you sort of, the next trip is really what complicates, you know, if you're getting a next trip and you're not heading to the location, you know, that you want to be headed to, that's what really complicates things. So I think that Uber is, you know, it was probably only a matter of time before they solved that, but it sounds like they're working to solve it. I haven't actually seen it since they literally just launched it a couple days ago, but we'll see, you know, how it goes and how it works. But I think it should be pretty smooth. So Rosie says, I've had passengers ask if they could request a car with a car seat. I carry one for safety reasons. So that's, you know, honestly, it's been a while. I don't know if I've ever gotten a request for like an actual toddler, like someone that's like 1 or 2 years old. But yeah, I would never do a ride with a toddler, you know, if it's sitting in someone's lap. That's just super unsafe and kind of just asking for trouble and liability. But I think if it is a problem in your area, I mean, obviously you don't have to, you know, have a car seat in the back of your car for passengers. But I mean, if you're getting these rides over and over, you know, I think it's definitely a solution, you know, that's up to you to provide. Obviously, it is tax deductible. So using something like QuickBooks Self-Employed definitely makes sense there because you can at least deduct it on your taxes. And then, yeah, I mean, you know, I guess the other situation where this comes up is with minors. If you're getting a lot of requests for minors, you know, there's not a great way to avoid that. And, you know, if you drive to a minor and then, you know, in California, for example, it's against the CPUC or even, I think even against the law and against Uber's terms of service to give rides to minors under 18. And so a lot of drivers, you know, don't want to do those rides, but it still sucks if you have to drive there and then cancel that ride because you just wasted time, money, and effort getting to that minor, and then you have to cancel on them, right? So I know that some drivers basically just say, hey, I have a dash cam running at all times, and that's sort of my protection. That's sort of my liability policy, which I think is smart if you're gonna do those rides. And Tony says, yes, that is correct. Uber is getting out of the Xchange leasing and enterprise rental program. So there is still Hertz. There are a bunch of third-party options like Maven. Ago is one small one in Chicago that does electric rentals. Uber has a pilot with Getaround in San Francisco. So there's a bunch on our site. If you go to the Uber vehicle marketplace on the Rideshare guy, if you search for that, you'll be able to see all of the existing options and see what's available in your area there. So let's see, what other questions do we have? These are all good, thank you guys. If this is your first time joining, I really appreciate it. We're almost up to 100 people watching live right now, which is awesome. And I do appreciate each and every single one of you for subscribing to the channel, joining these YouTube lives. They're a bit of work, but they're definitely fun to interact with you guys. And if this is your first time joining, welcome. If you guys have been on these YouTube lives before, welcome back. And we do these every single month. You know, we usually break down the top news stories, a couple app updates, and then really focus most of the time answering all of your questions and answers. And today we've got a cool giveaway. We're giving away 2 free 1-year subscriptions to QuickBooks Self-Employed. So make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end, and I'm going to keep on answering a bunch of these questions for you. So Mr. Watson says, Zipcar 2. If you're referring to, you can't actually use Zipcars to drive for Uber and Lyft. You can't use regular rental cars because your name has to be on the insurance. And I'm not aware of any pilots that Zipcar has with Uber and Lyft, but if they do, feel free to correct me and feel free to let me know about that one. Poor Dad's Ride said, what is the best dash cam for filming in the car at night? And honestly, we've tried a bunch of dash cams. We've got a bunch of videos and blog posts. So if you guys search on our channel for dash cam reviews, we've got one on the Falcon 0360, which is the one that I use. We've got one on the Zero Edge dual lens, and then we've also got one more review up there. So we have all these, probably the top 3 or 4 dash cams for drivers reviewed on our site with videos and everything. So you can get a better look there. But honestly, I haven't found the perfect dash cam for Uber and Lyft drivers because you need something that obviously has really good night vision, that has that nice wide angle so you can get the driver, the front seat passenger, and the back seat. And there's just a whole lot of features that I don't think any dash cam does perfectly. Maybe that'll be a project I'll take on in the future, and we can create some dash cams for you guys. But for now, the best one that I've found, and the one I personally use, is the Falcon 360. And we've got a really good in-depth review on our site of that one, so you can check it out out. It's more expensive. It's around $120 to $160 depending on when and where you get it. But that's the one that I use. And I feel like it's one of the better ones out there because it does have the dual facing dash cams. And, you know, for me, especially for you guys, you know, I think a lot of people don't realize that you may be the best driver in the world, but you can't control what other people do, right? Getting into an accident, especially if you're reliant on Uber and Lyft for your income, if you get into an accident and the other person's at fault, you can go after the other person for lost wages if you can prove or if they admit fault, right? Not a lot of times drivers don't admit fault, but if you have dash cam evidence, dash cam footage, right, that could end up saving you guys thousands of dollars right there. I mean, even really tens of thousands of dollars. And then of course, for the liability issues, if you run into passengers accusing you of something or saying something that you didn't do, right, all of these different types of issues that, you know, really the unknown. I think of a dash cam as really a cheap insurance policy, right? So that's definitely something that I recommend, and I think that you guys should take a look. All right, so Bob says, I got a Falcon 360 on eBay for $199. That seems a little expensive. I think that you can find one on Amazon, and if you guys want to use, we do have an Amazon affiliate link, so that's a great way to support the site. If you ever are shopping on Amazon in general or buying dash cams or anything, you can head to the rideshareguy.com/Amazon, and then anything you buy in the next 24 or 48 hours, we get a small percentage. So cool. And then let's see. Okay, what other questions we have coming in? Some comments. Tony says, do you have to notify your passengers that you are recording? Very good point. I forgot to mention that in a lot of states, you have to at least have a sticker up saying that you're recording audio and or video, and every state is different. So I would just Google whatever your state. So California dash cam recording laws or whatever it might be. In California, for example, I know that you have to have a sticker up if you're going to record audio or video. Just to be safe though, I have a sticker that I bought on Amazon that just says like you're on camera, and then that way I'm kind of protected, you know, either way, just so you don't have to worry about it. Impale says Ojo Cam is sufficient. Yeah, I've never heard of that one, but you know, I know other drivers use GoPros. You know, there's a lot of random ones on there, and you know, you can really, you know, as long as it's sort of, you know, I definitely would say if you're looking for a dash cam, make sure that you get the two-way, and hopefully it has good night vision. So definitely check those out. And let's see, what other comments do we have coming in? Bob says, in California, you must let the persons know that they are being recorded. So he has signs in his car saying, smile, you're on camera. I have the exact same thing. So I think that's smart either way. And honestly, you know, one other, I'll finish on this with the dash cams. I found that since there's this tiny little green light, you know, sometimes passengers notice it. I've never had problems with it or anything, but when passengers know they're on camera, they tend to behave better. And so I feel like my passengers are a little bit better behaved because they know that they're on camera. So that's actually another good reason. So I don't know, I think that there's so many positive reasons for that. And then Scradgy, okay, the last dash cam question for reals this time. He says, ever had Falcon Zero file corruption issues? And I've never personally had that, but I know that some drivers have. And this is pretty common with GoPros, with dash cams, where you're recording and re-recording a lot on those SD cards, those micro SD cards. They can get corrupted really easily. And so sometimes you just have to reformat it. Usually it's not a camera issue, but if you do have a camera issue, you can always reach out to Falcon. They have pretty good customer service. So I know people have gotten pretty good help for them. So let's see, what other question? Bob says he got it for $119 on eBay. So eBay is always a good spot to check for sure. And let's see, Brian says, I have never ever gotten an UberPOOL ride. Uber says there's nothing wrong with my account. Any ideas? Well, Brian, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. I think we surveyed, you know, over 1,100 drivers, and in LA, for example, which is like a big UberPOOL market, 74% of the drivers we surveyed were actually dissatisfied with their UberPOOL experience. So a lot of drivers are not big fans of UberPOOL, to put it mildly. So I don't know that you're actually you know, missing out on anything there. So I don't know if there's anything wrong with your account. It may depend on your market. If you're in somewhere like LA or San Francisco and you've never gotten an UberPOOL ride, something's definitely wrong. But maybe you're in a smaller market where UberPOOL is pretty new, or you're just in areas where people aren't carpooling as much, because there's no way really to opt out of UberPOOL. You can ignore UberPOOL requests, but you can't really opt out. And I know some drivers have tried and sent me screenshots, but I've never found a good, reliable way of opting out. So Neil says, no pool, blessing or curse. I would say that it's probably a bit of a blessing, but hey, if you are in a place like San Francisco, I'm about to record a video on this, for example, there are times where you want a bunch of trips, right? You want a bunch of short pool trips, right? Because pool trips all count towards bonuses. So if you're on if you need to do 20 trips a week in order to get a bonus, for example, you actually want a bunch of short trips. You want a bunch of pool trips. So, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Richie, welcome back. He says, howdy, my man Harry, 2 years in and you're still giving great advice. That's what we try to do. So thank you for joining again. And let's see, X Milo says, what is the best way to see airport queue from afar? And that's right. So if you're not near the airport, you may not be able to see the queue. I know that there's apps like Gridwise, for example, which is only in Pittsburgh and DC, I believe, but they're testing a feature that actually shows you, it kind of crowdsources data to show you what the airport queue is. But if for some reason, you're not near an airport and you want to see what the queue is, I think one of the best ways is just to network with other drivers, because, if you get close to the airport, you can check it, or if you're obviously in the queue, you can check it. And I think that, if you have a nice little network of drivers, whether it's through something like a Zello or Voxer group, where you're chatting with them, or even something simple like a Facebook group or something like that, where you're sharing information. This is something that taxis have been doing for a while, right? Forever on their radios. They're sharing information with each other. So I think that's definitely one of the benefits of knowing other drivers, of, kind of like associating, trying to find other drivers who are like you, like who want to know what the queue is. So if you're not there, you can ask them and get that information. So definitely, that's something you can try. Janice says, I hate UberPOOL. It's a waste of time. I think a lot of drivers feel similarly. Bob says, I use Maestro and Pool is always off. So as you guys know, I'm a big fan of Maestro. If you're not familiar with the app, it actually allows you to automatically drive for Uber and Lyft. So it'll automatically log you on to Uber and Lyft driver apps, and then it'll automatically accept an Uber request, for example, and then automatically log you off of Lyft instantaneously. And then once that Uber trip is over, it logs you back onto Lyft. So it really allows you to get more trips without having to touch the screen. A lot safer, gets you more trips, makes you more money, and it has the ability to filter things out. Like if you don't want to do UberPOOL rides, it'll ignore those UberPOOL requests. It will ignore certain passenger ratings and everything. So I'm a big fan of the app. I actually recently came on as an advisor for Maestro. So in addition, I promote Maestro as an affiliate. So if you guys sign up using our link for Maestro, I get a small payout, whatever, $5 or something like that. And then, actually, I don't know how much it is, but if you sign up, pay for the app, and then I get a small commission. And now I'm actually an advisor, so I'm helping Maestro, with feedback, for example. So if you guys have feedback on the app, I want to give that directly to Maestro and really just kind of help them establish themselves. Because I really love these apps that are helping drivers, anything that's driver friendly, that's helping kind of reverse some of that power, make you guys more money, really just help improve the driver experience. Those are always apps that I'm interested in. And Maestro is definitely something that I'm a big fan of. X Nilo says, Maestro needs the iOS app. And you're right, it's only on Android right now just because of the way it works. It needs access to the accessibility options, and you can't do that on iOS. You can only do that on Android. So they're working on an update for iOS, but in the meantime, you have to use an Android phone to get it to work. Basically. So definitely, I know drivers have actually signed up for Android just so they could use Maestro. So it's pretty cool. And as Christian mentioned in the comments, Maestro was actually created by a San Francisco and LA driver. His name is Herb Coakley. He has over 10,000 rides, and he thought of the idea while driving. So definitely something to keep in mind. Speaking about apps, Poor Dad's Ride says, you said you like QuickBooks. Say why you like it so much. One of the reasons why I like QuickBooks Self-Employed, well, first of all, they're an advertiser on our site, so you should obviously know that. Take that with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, I think that tracking your miles is probably one of the most important things that you can do. Not only does QuickBooks Self-Employed help you track your miles, though, they sort of really give you a more holistic view, right? So if you want to look at your profit and loss on the year, let's say you have a more expensive car and you want to determine whether the actual expenses or the standard mileage is better for you, QuickBooks Self-Employed allows you to do that at the end of the year. Whereas if you were just just tracking mileage on your own, you would then have to go and calculate all your expenses. So if you're into apps, if you kind of want to take it to the next level, you know, for most people, it might be easier just to track mileage and just take the standard mileage deduction. But let's say you buy a new car, or you're on Uber XL or Uber SUV or UberBlack, right? You have higher expenses. You know, there's just all these reasons where, hey, if you're really looking to, you know, get into some of the nitty gritty, but, you know, frankly, save yourself a lot more money when it comes to taxes and get all those deductions, that's definitely where it helps. So definitely you guys can check those out. Yeah, sorry, I keep calling you out a few times. I don't know why. Ex Nilo, your name just keeps popping up into my into my point of view. So I keep answering all your questions. But I'm going to try to answer some other questions for now. We still have got plenty of time. So we're all the way up to 108 people watching live right now, which is awesome. So thank you guys all for joining. I really do appreciate it. These are a lot of fun answering your questions. And let's see. Scradgy says, Voxer is great. Get your crew in your city into it. And I'm telling you guys, a lot of these, you know, we have a cool podcast coming out where I interviewed a couple drivers, and, you know, some of the strategies, if you guys just go out there and really start talking to a lot of other drivers, and, you know, I do it a lot on the podcast. That's where I do a lot of my interviews. We don't do a ton of interviews with other drivers on YouTube or on the blog, you know, so we're not really sharing all of those strategies. But I'm telling you, there's so much value, I think, by connecting with other drivers, especially ones who are kind of like-minded, right? You can go on to forums and Facebook groups and find a bunch of people just bitching about how much it sucks to be an Uber and Lyft driver. But you could also imagine the people who are really killing it, the people who are really successful, are not the ones who are going to be sitting there complaining about it, right? They're going to be the ones out there doing it. And so those are the people that you want to network with. Those are the people that you want to find. And, you know, there's a famous quote that says, you know, you are the average of the 5 people that are closest to you. And I'm a big believer in that, right? I want to associate with people who think like me, right? Obviously, driving for Uber and Lyft, there are a lot of positives and negatives, but at the end of the day, if you're doing it, you want to do it best. You want to make the most amount of money possible, right? So why wouldn't you want to associate with those types of people that can help you, right? And those Voxer groups, those communities of drivers, they're out there. You do have to do some work to find them, but definitely, you know, we have a link on our site, the rideshareguy.com/Facebook groups. That's a good starting point. We've got an article on the site too, how to connect with other drivers. So there's a lot of good resources. If you guys have any questions about this, just email me and we'll get it to you. So let's see, what else do we have coming in? And okay, let's see. Rich says, Harry, not sure what you covered on here so far, but I like the fact that Uber is letting passengers know it's 3-minute courtesy stop on additional stops. I'll cancel after 5 minutes. Yeah, so we covered the new, basically, I guess you would call it a policy on those additional stops. And then let's see, Christian says, Voxer is the best. Gerald says, I noticed today for the first time we're now able to call Uber for help. And, you know, I thought actually, someone emailed me about this a few weeks ago. I thought that Uber launched 24/7 support line for drivers a while ago. And I thought that it was a national rollout, but it sounds like there's still some cities that are getting it today. So if you go onto your Uber driver app, you should have a little icon, basically, that's a little telephone, and you can call Uber. I know Phoenix didn't have it for a while, because one of our writers in Phoenix tried to call them and realized she didn't have it. But, you know, if you don't have Uber phone support yet, I suspect it's coming pretty soon. You know, I'd be curious to know about your experience with Uber phone support. It's kind of annoying. You call in, you have to go through all these menus, and it's about 2 minutes to go through all the menus, but the response times have definitely been pretty quick. After that point, I've never waited more than about 30 to 45 seconds to talk to someone, but then you're talking to a service representative, and, you know, I'd say that certain questions they can definitely answer better than the others. Things like logistics, things like, you know, hey, what time are the office hours that I could go into? Or, you know, if you have easy kind of logistic questions that really only Uber can help with, I think they're a lot better than if you have sort of the more complex stuff. Or if you were to ask them, for example, like, how do I handle a situation where, you know, 5 passengers tried to get into my car, but I can only take 4, like, they probably won't be able to help you. They probably won't be able to answer that question. Mr. Watson says, support, it's more like third world people that can't speak in English. And, you know, I would say that they definitely have an accent. So yeah, they are using, you know, that third party support probably in a country not in the US. But, you know, I think for certain situations, they can definitely help. So I wouldn't write off Uber support completely, but definitely just understand that for those logistical, for those kind of more basic questions, they can probably help and do a pretty good job. But for anything that's like next level, anything that they can't sort of like reference, and kind of get more complex with, it's going to struggle. So I am hoping that that gets better over time. Hopefully they'll have departments in the future that specialize in Uber Exchange, for example. Well, probably not Uber Exchange, but maybe they'll have departments that specialize in instant pay. So if you do have questions on instant pay, they can really help you. They'll have a specialized team. It's not set up that way right now, but that's definitely my hope in the future. So, I think Uber, it was nice that they announced or sort of released that 24/7 support, but now going forward, we definitely want to see a lot better help. B. Colwell says, Harry, nice swag. He likes the t-shirt. So yeah, we got the Rideshare guy t-shirt on right here. And we'll probably give away, if you guys, we're giving away the QuickBooks Self-Employed at the end. We'll probably give away a couple Rideshare guy trucker hats too, since those are really popular. And Cheryl says, can you call Uber support for waitlisted or considered background check issues? So if you're an existing driver, you can usually call Uber support. But if you're a new driver, they may not always allow you, or if you're in an area where it's not there yet, some of those more specific things, like that's a good example where Uber's probably not going to be able to help with any kind of like background check issues. You're probably going to have to email Checker. I think actually their email is support@checker.com, because I've emailed, I've had to tell a lot of people I have problems with that. It's CHECKR.com. So if you're having problems with background check issues, that's definitely something that you can do. Or you can always go in person to office hours and try to do that there. So let's see, Eric says, I got ripped off by them about 3 times for trips that were over 60 miles. Not sure what you're talking about, but feel free to details. And B. Colwell says, is this a good time to organize? I'm assuming that you're referring to organizing drivers. I think that there's always power in organizing drivers, like I talked about with those small groups of drivers or something bigger. What I think that a lot of people don't realize, and honestly, frankly, even I've received some criticism from people saying, hey, why aren't you out there organizing drivers and really representing drivers? And I think it's a lot easier said than done. If you guys have ever tried to sell anything on Craigslist, you know all about how tough it is for online accountability, right? You tell someone to be here at 3 p.m. and they don't show up, right? 90% of the time. And it's similar, organizing drivers online. I think the most successful organized groups have started at more of a grassroots level and found a bunch of drivers who, are interested in the same things, improving the same things, because there are a lot, whether you're a part-time or full-time driver, we probably all want higher rates. But I mean, really what I'm sort of trying to explain is that, it's a full-time job. I would almost say that it's going to eventually turn into a full-time job if you're really looking to organizing drivers. There's a lot of opportunity there, I think. But, for me, I know that it's basically completely different. My product, what we do is content, right? I have Christian right now who works full-time for me. We have Melissa behind the scenes who's also full-time, and that's just to do 4 articles a week, 2 YouTube videos a week, and 1 podcast every 2 to 3 weeks. We have 3 people working full-time plus a bunch of writers, right? So you can sort of see that behind the scenes, a lot of times there's a lot more that goes into these things. So I'm all for it, and I'm happy to help. We've got a couple good articles on the site actually that sort of lays out a blueprint about how to organize your drivers, what's been successful in the past, what pitfalls you should avoid. So definitely, that's something that you can check out. David says their support is, Uber support is in Manila, saying hello in Tagalog. Kumusta ka, or thank you, salamat, gets you better service on average. And that's actually a really good point. So if if you're talking to these service representatives and that they're in the Philippines, my wife is Filipino, so and I'm trying to learn Tagalog, so it's funny. David mentioned kumusta ka, I think is how you say hello, and salamat is how you say thank you. And that's definitely, you can imagine that these service representatives, they want to do well, but sometimes they're just not that well trained, and sometimes they don't have the best resources. And you can imagine it's tough for you as a driver in the moment. You probably want that good support, you want that good help, but frankly, yelling at them or being a dick or being rude or being an asshole probably isn't going to get you what you want. It might make you feel good in the short term, but that's what most people do. That's the easy thing to do, right? When you get frustrated, it's easy to take it out on someone else. And I think that, I've always found that you can get much better support, much better service when you're you're the opposite type of customer. You're someone who's understanding, right? You understand where they're coming from. They're just trying to do their job, right? So whatever you can do to make that easier, and it's tough, right? I mean, when I'm talking to customer service representatives, representatives, I try to empathize with them and say, hey, I know this isn't your, even if I'm super pissed, right? I say, hey, I know this isn't your fault. Someone designed this and it's terrible. It doesn't work, but here's what I'm trying to get resolved. So I think that's definitely, something that you can keep in mind and, try to get better service. Christian says, let's face it, as a group, Uber drivers are probably a bit grumpy, and I think that's definitely, something that I agree with. So let's see. Janice says, star ratings are bogus. Half the people don't even rate. And that's a good point. We have a video actually on how to get more passengers to rate you, because ratings are tough because it's important to maintain a 4.6. You don't want to be deactivated, but at the end of the day, the difference between a 4.8 and a 4.9 is nothing. You're not going to get more trips. You're not going to get more money. I would almost argue that there's times where you probably save yourself a lot of hassle. If you're getting, if you're sort of saving those ratings, basically, those kind of rating bombs, right? If you get a passenger who is being an asshole or being a dick and you want to kick them out of your car, and you're going to take a rating hit, having that high rating so that you can take that rating hit might save you money or might save you hassle. There's those types of situations, but for the most part, I would say that, there's all these problems with the rating system, and I think that Uber can do a lot to fix it. But for now, that's what we have. And I would say inherently, the better drivers are getting better ratings. Like, that's really what it boils down to. So it can be tough to figure out what you're doing wrong. A lot of, if you're struggling with ratings, a lot of it stems from navigation and safe driving. Just make sure you understand your city, right? You should be able to know which direction is north, east, south, west, where the major landmarks are. And I'm here in LA. You have to know that the 10 runs east to west, the 405 runs north to south, and I believe there's a little trick because odd number freeways usually run north to south and even run east to west, right? You have to know these things. You have to know that in the GPS says turn right in 400 feet. You should be able to approximate, if you're going 30 miles an hour, you should sort of know that, okay, it's going to take me about 2 to 3 seconds to go 400 feet, and that's where I make that right turn, so that you're not constantly looking down at your GPS. These little things really matter and kind of add up over time. And frankly, drivers, they're not trained in customer service. They're not trained in navigation and safe driving. So you have to learn a lot of these things on your own. But I think if you're putting yourself in that customer, in that passenger experience, and that's my number one piece of advice for new drivers and really just drivers in general. I think it's our most popular YouTube video with hundreds of thousands of views. But my advice is to really go take a ride as a passenger, because you'll learn so much. You get a free ride your first one. You can use our code if you like, or anyone's code, and you'll get a free ride on Uber and Lyft actually, and you can learn a lot that way too. So hopefully that's helpful. A healthy state of mind says, does Uber Eats gets ratings? And I'm not a big Uber Eats what would you call it, doer or driver, but passengers do leave either a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and Postmates and DoorDash have now switched to like a thumbs up, or actually they may use still a rating system, but definitely, your Uber Eats ratings are separate from your UberX ratings is really my point. So Neil says, we are forced to rate immediately, so should the passenger. And that's a good point. I mean, we've found that only about 40 to 50% of passengers actually rate the drivers. And you can sort of imagine that, frankly, a lot of those passengers that aren't rating probably would give you good ratings, right? Because you think about it, who are the people that leave ratings? Usually if you have a really bad experience, you're going to leave a rating, right? So your ratings might be a little skewed towards the negative. One of the things I talked about in this video, I believe it's called How to Get More Passengers to Rate You, is that there's little tricks that you can do to get more people to rate you, because you're trying to get all those passengers who aren't going to rate you are probably people who had a good experience, probably people who are going to rate you 5 stars. They're definitely not people who had a bad experience, because if they have a bad experience, they're going to rate you, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But some of the things we talked about is, ending the trip a little bit early and showing, telling the passenger, for example, hey, you're a great passenger, I'm gonna leave you 5 stars. So that way you're not asking for 5 stars. I think that's a mistake that a lot of drivers make. You go to the Ritz-Carlton and they don't ask you for a 5-star review when you leave, right? They provide 5-star service, or that's what they strive to do, so that when you go back to rate it, you're like, man, that was 5 stars. That was a no-brainer, right? So it's sort of similar with a driver. You kind of want to go and make sure you're providing that experience. But even there's little things like that that you can do, that when that passenger is leaving, say, hey, I'm going to leave you a rating right now. You can leave if you have time to leave me feedback. It'd be greatly appreciated. It helps with my rating, or something. It helps with whatever. So just kind of guilt tripping them a little bit without kind of saying, hey, leave me 5 stars, I think is the best strategy. So Let's see. All right. We've got Kyle jumping in from State Farm. Welcome, Kyle, talking about insurance. So he's our insurance expert. And Steven says, if the passenger gives a 1-star just to do it for no reason, can we dispute this? And unfortunately, no, you can't. You can try, actually this I wrote about this the other day. This literally happened to me the other day. I got a 1-star and I have no idea what it was from, but I saw that my percentage went from 0% to 1% on Uber. So that was like probably, it rounded up. But I was pissed, even though it doesn't really have that impact, and Uber basically didn't do anything about it. And unfortunately, now Uber's made this change where you can no longer change riders' ratings. So you used to be able to change a rider's passengers' ratings, and I believe that you can no longer do that. So definitely a lot of improvements that Uber hopefully will make to the passenger and really driver rating system. David says, I have 5,963 rides and only 3,900 people have rated me. About 65% of my passengers rate me. So that's actually a pretty good percentage. I'd say that's pretty high. If you're getting 65% of your passengers to rate you, that's definitely pretty good. Let's see, Jason says, Lyft's bailout feature is driving me nuts. Is there any way to delay that longer? I'm not sure what the bailout feature is, but feel free to let me know. Jay says, what's up from New York City? Welcome to all my New York City drivers. I know we have a bunch in there. Ronnie says, does State Farm have rideshare insurance in Indiana? And like Kyle mentioned, we do have a page on the website. If you type in rideshare insurance on the rideshare guy, or just search for that, rideshare insurance, rideshare guy, something like that, you'll probably be able to find it. And you can actually see all the options that are available by state. Kyle, for example, is one of our recommended agents. Kyle Middleton is one of our recommended agents in California for State Farm. And I'm a big fan of those State Farm policies because they actually provide you coverage from periods 1 to 3. So you actually never even have to deal. If you get into an accident, whether you're in period 1 or even if you're out driving for Uber, you can actually make a claim with State Farm. And Lyft, for example, has a $2,500 collision deductible, which is huge. Most drivers don't know about it until it's too late. So rideshare insurance, especially with a program like State Farm, can definitely save you big there. So I recommend taking a look at that. Neil says, try Farmers Insurance. Farmers is another good option. There's a bunch of companies that offer it. Really the challenging part, though, is finding a company in your area or in your state, since insurance is a state-by-state issue. So State Farm is in California, Farmers is in California, but they're not in every state. But we have that database on our site that will basically, let you know. Kyle says, yes, it is available in Indiana. So that's helpful right there. Jay has a good question coming in right now. Is it a good idea going from Uber XL to Uber Black? So Jay, I'm assuming that you're saying you're driving on Uber XL right now, thinking about going to Uber Black. And this is a question we get from a lot of drivers because they really, they see Uber Black, they see Uber SUV, and there's these much higher rates, right? And it's kind of like obviously attractive, you want to make more money, and Uber Black and SUV have much higher rates. But the thing that you have to understand is that Uber Black and Uber SUV is actually closed to individual drivers, new applications, basically everywhere. So if I'm a new driver and I want to go drive for Uber Black, I can't apply with Uber. I actually have to go through a fleet owner, right? So someone who already has a license for Uber Black with Uber, since they limit the number of licenses on Uber Black, unlike Uber X, right? There's unlimited drivers on Uber X. On Uber Black, they limit it in every city. And so if you want to drive for Uber Black, you have to do it through a fleet owner, which is a lot less flexible. You might have to pay $500 a week, and then they'll give you a car. All you're responsible for is gas. They take care of maintenance, insurance, everything else. But it's expensive. These fleet owners are paying $3,000 to $5,000 a year for commercial insurance. So there's all these other costs. And I know some drivers have been able to make it work. So it's definitely something. We've got a bunch of resources that can help you with that if you're interested in learning more about that. Let's see. All right, I see a good question right here from H. Mong Peri. They say, Should we take the longest route during a trip to make the most out of our trips? Some people know their route. So I think you might be referring to this article that we wrote once that was basically, I think we called it how to hack Uber's upfront pricing or something like that. So just to give you guys a quick little background, Uber uses upfront pricing now. So a passenger basically gets quoted a fare, and that's what they're going to pay no matter what, right? As long as, well, let's say no matter what, right? So if they get quoted $20, now you as a driver though, like I mentioned earlier, you still get paid off of mileage and time. So let's say you go 10 miles, you're gonna get paid for 10 miles. Let's say you go 9 miles, you're still gonna get paid for 9 miles. And we tested this a bunch, and what we found is that as long as, when you guys map to the destination, Google Maps usually, or Waze, recommend, we did it with Google Maps, so I'd advise with Google Maps, it'll give you 3 recommended routes, and those might be varying distances and varying time. As long as you go one of those recommended routes, the passenger still pays the same price, but you as a driver could make more or less. So you can imagine that, let's say, you can either cut through the middle of the city and go all city side streets, or you can go around on 2 different freeways to get to the destination. On the freeway route, you might go 5 miles further, maybe 2 or 3 miles further. You'll actually make more money on that route. So if you're real slick and you're real savvy in that type of situation, you might ask the passenger, hey, is it okay if I take the freeway route because it'll be faster, or it'll be the same amount of time and we probably won't hit traffic. And you can also just let them know that, don't worry, your fare is going to stay the same. So I think that's like a nice little hack that, if you're real savvy, you can kind of take advantage of that. We've got an article that breaks that down in a little bit more specifics. So let's see. Upfront pricing is a ripoff for drivers. Yeah, I mean, we've looked at this. We actually have a spreadsheet on our site. If you guys are curious in seeing, what percentage Uber is taking from all your trips, we did a big analysis from Curtis in San Diego, and this was a couple months ago, but we actually found that Uber wasn't, some trips on upfront pricing, you might say Uber's taking 50%. On others, it might be closer to 20%. On UberPOOL rides, they might actually be losing money some of the time. So if you want the spreadsheet about how to actually calculate all of that and see what Uber's taking, you might be surprised at the numbers. I won't get too much into that because it's a little complex. And let's see. Jason says, I've been yards from riders when this bogus cancellation message comes in. Once I continued to rider who told me he was messaged that the ride canceled. I would probably have to know a little bit more about that situation to help. Eric says, Harry, is there a Zello channel for Uber and Lyft drivers nationwide? Not that I know of. I mean, Zello and Voxer, these walkie-talkie apps, are really better for the real-time communication, sort of stuff with people in your area. I think the Facebook groups and forums and Reddit Uber drivers or Lyft drivers is probably better for like that nationwide stuff. James says, SF is the gold mine yet once again, even when there are no active gold mines in SF any longer. And yeah, SF is definitely one of the more lucrative cities to drive in. Kyle says, using Turo to rideshare violates the terms of the rental with Turo. And so yeah, if you guys are looking for the different vehicle options, you can't use just a regular rental with, so if you go to Enterprise or if you go to Hertz or something and just rent a car from them, you can't use that on Uber and Lyft because your name isn't on the insurer's card. You actually won't even be able to get it approved because of that. But Uber does have, pilots and starting, they don't have the Xchange and the Enterprise partnership anymore, but there are some other options now that we have listed on the site on the Uber Vehicle Marketplace. So Christian says, SF is also the most expensive city to drive in, which is a good point, which is why most drivers don't live in the city. So definitely if you're driving in San Francisco and you want to maximize, you probably shouldn't be living in the city, Christian. And then David says, how do you go about getting the Uber sticker? And, I believe that we either have an article or video. I want to say we have a video on this. I'm pretty sure we have a video on this, but basically you can get the Uber trade dress sticker. I believe if you go to help.uber.com and search for trade dress, you can actually request it online, because I did this recently and I think I made a video about it. If not, it's a pretty simple process. So start with help.uber.com. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And if not, I can shoot me an email, harry@therideshareguy.com, and I'll help you find that. So David says, is driving at night the only way to go full-time and make money for Uber? He's in Dallas, Fort Worth. And, I guess what I would say is, there's definitely strategies and, that are going to make you most or more profitable. I mean, driving nights, you typically make more money on Friday and Saturday nights. But I would also say, it's important to think about what works well with your schedule. Do you have to do nights to do full-time? No. You can easily do early morning airport runs, right? But if you just want to drive, let's say during, after rush hour traffic in the mornings till early evenings, those tend to be the least profitable hours to drive. So, I guess what I would say is that if you want to maximize your income, then you probably want to either consider driving nights or weekends or early morning AM airport runs, from 3 to 6 or 7 AM when you get those longer rides and there's no traffic. But really it's a balance, right? You have to balance when are the most profitable times to drive with what works best with your schedule, right? Because you may not want to work till 3 or 4 AM. Frankly, like I'm kind of overdoing the party hours of Friday, Saturday nights. I'll do it once in a while, but I usually stop now around 10 or 11 PM. And sometimes, yeah, I could make more money if I keep driving till 2 or 3 AM, and once in a while I will do it. But what works well with your schedule, right? I mean, I don't want to, the next morning, then maybe my next morning is shot, and that affects, what I'm doing the next day, right? So it's really balancing what works well with your schedule and where can you make the most amount of money. That's sort of how I look at it. Jay has a good question here. Do you think the London situation affects us here in the United States? And without getting too much into the weeds, so Uber is technically, I guess, got banned in London, but they're appealing the decision. And in general, Europe is a much different labor market than the United States. There's a lot more unions. Labor is much stronger. The joke that I make is whenever you go to Europe, someone's on strike, whether it's like the air traffic controllers or the trains or the buses, or someone's always on strike in Europe. And so I think that really taxis in London, where you have to take this test called the knowledge, and it's like crazy, way more requirements to become a taxi in London. And the taxi drivers, from what I've heard, are actually pretty damn good, although they still have some of the more rudimentary systems. But basically what happens is, the taxis are more entrenched in London. So even though Uber is popular in London, it's a lot harder for them to break in there and use their kind of ride-sharing model where anyone with a car can do it. So I think Uber is going to face a lot more challenges in Europe than they have in the US. And will it affect us in the US? I don't think it's going to have a big effect. I don't think it's really going to have any effect at all in the US, but what I do see having an effect are some of these studies, for example, like the UC Davis study that I mentioned at the top, because now you guys see, right, there's this article that came out the other day, 2/3 of all the moving violations in downtown San Francisco were caused by Uber and Lyft drivers, stopping in areas where they shouldn't be, making illegal U-turns. And I think since there's 45, 50,000 drivers in San Francisco, tens of thousands of drivers in other cities, it's starting to cause a lot of problems. It's starting to cause some congestion. And I think that cities are really going to start looking at that and going to have to weigh the benefit of, hey, if having all these transportation options, does that outweigh all the havoc that Uber and Lyft drivers are causing? So, I don't think that it's directly going to have an impact, but, Uber and Lyft are by no means done with their sort of regulatory battles. I think the next level is going to be all of the kind of, mobility or, issues, I guess I would call it, that they're going to be having. So definitely, something to keep in mind. So let's see. If you guys have any questions coming in, let's see. We're going to end in a few minutes here. So we're at 6 p.m. So I think we'll do the giveaway now. And let's see. What did I say for the giveaway? So if you guys made it all the way to end, thank you very much. We'll do our QuickBooks Self-Employed giveaway right now. If you have any final questions, feel free to get them in right now. So like I said, we're going to be giving out 2 free year-long subscriptions to QuickBooks Self-Employed. Plus, we'll probably send out some Rideshare guy swag, some trucker hats, stuff like that to our, so the grand prize is the QuickBooks Self-Employed, but then we'll have some second place prizes, some hats, some cool hats with this logo. And so basically, in order to win this QuickBooks Self-Employed, here's what you need to do. You're going to have to email Christian, christian@therideshareguy.com with subject line QBSE. Now, this is very important. Make sure that you email Christian@therideshareguy.com, subject line QBSE, and then let us know what is the best deduction you've ever taken, right? So maybe you've deducted just miles, maybe you've deducted your cell phone, maybe you deduct your water bottle while you're driving, maybe you deduct a dash cam, right? Lots of different options. So in order to enter the contest, in order to enter the giveaway for today, let's recap. Email Christian@therideshareguy.com and subject line QBSE, and then let us know what your best deduction to date has been. We'll go ahead and announce the winners, and we'll make sure on our next YouTube Live, we'll make sure that we announce whoever won the prior, today, basically. So, and we'll, of course, notify you and everything. And if you guys do want to sign up for QBSE, we'll leave a link in the comments below, therideshareguy.com/YTQBSE. Yeah, if you guys have any questions there, really appreciate everyone coming on. Tom says, here's a good last question. Where in California is best to drive, LA or San Diego? I'd say probably LA, although San Diego has less traffic. I think San Francisco in general is the most profitable place to drive just because there's so much competition. Christian says, last month our winners were Sammy and Bill for the QuickBooks self-employed giveaway. So definitely thank you guys for joining. Like I said, we do these monthly YouTube Live Q&As for 1 hour every single month, usually the first week of the month. I think this month we're a little bit late. We'll try to get back into that first or second week of the month starting in November. And really appreciate you guys joining. And if you guys do have any questions, if you have any anything that we didn't really get to, feel free to leave a comment below. If you're not watching live, you're watching after the fact, feel free to leave a comment below and we'll make sure that we get to it. It looks like James just contributed $2, so that's awesome. Thank you for the support, James. And yeah, it looks like we got a couple funny questions coming in. I won't read them off, a little inappropriate. But thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next month. And yeah, all right, cool. Take care, guys.